welcome to Crossroads. Folks, a Venezuelan illegal immigrant posted a viral video online telling other illegal immigrants that they can legally expropriate the homes of Americans through our squatter rights laws. Now, the issue of squatter rights has been growing in the United States as several states, they actually allow people to live rent-free in homes while the homeowners can't do anything about it. Let me show you this. This is New York Post. It says, a migrant TikToker with a 500,000 strong online following is offering his comrades tips on how to invade unoccupied homes and invoke squatters' rights in the United States. Venezuelan national Leonel Moreno, who appears to live in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, said in a recent video that under U.S. law, quote, if a house is not inhabited, we can seize it, and appeared to be referring to adverse possession laws, commonly known as squatters' rights, which allow unlawful property occupants rights over the property they occupy without the owner's consent in certain circumstances. It notes that Moreno claimed in the viral TikTok video clip, which has drawn more than 3.9 million views, that he has African friends who have already taken about 7 homes. Let me show you, let me play you some of this. You can get an idea of what he's saying.
Mi gente, he pensado invadir una casa en United States, ya que me enteré que existe una ley que dice que si una casa no está habitada, podemos expropiarla.
Yeah, so what do you think of your new neighbor, right? Look, the benefits are pretty high also. Apparently under these laws, you can steal just about any home this way as long as it's not currently occupied. People are even snagging mansions in extremely wealthy areas, even like Beverly Hills, for example, is not safe from this. New York Post noted that with basketball icon LeBron James recently erecting a lavish abode and power couple Jennifer Lopez and Ben Affleck dropping a cool $61 million on a compound last year, it seems the epitome of exclusivity, this area. And it notes that in Beverly Hills in California, Morgan Gargulio, an aspiring actor, spearheaded the operation, fabricating a false lease to establish his claim over a mansion without facing any legal repercussions, according to this. It notes that he seized a 5,900 square foot property, which had been on sale since last August for $4.6 million. And, he assumed it was fair game. It says here that this individual infiltrated what's often dubbed the most exclusive zip code in America, that being 90210. And his makeshift empire, it says, accommodated not only him, but also his fiancée and rotating cast of friends. He even turned a profit by renting out bedrooms at rates from $150 to $300 per night, although without providing lodging, it claims. Now look, it's not just wealthy people being targeted through these squatter rights. Because you could say, oh, well, yeah, those Beverly Hills, actors and so on, whatever. But it's actually anybody who tries renting a home. In fact, if you are selling your home and you put a for sale sign out front, that alone, in some instances, is being looked for by potential squatters for houses to move into and just occupy forever. It notes here that Hot Air says, Adele Andaloro grew up in her family's home in the Flushing neighborhood of Queens in New York City. It notes that recently, after her parents passed away, she inherited the $1 million property, which is frankly most properties these days in New York, when they left it to her in their will. She dutifully went about preparing the house for sale and put it up on the market. That's when everything began to go sideways, because what happened? It says 3 squatters broke into the home at night and set up residence, causing significant damage to the building and removing the for sale sign from the yard. When the woman found out, she returned and changed the locks, seeking to have them removed. But the level of insanity in this story, it says, only increased when the police responded by arresting her instead of the squatters. In other words, folks, not only can they seize your home, but if you try to kick them out, including by changing the locks, you could be the one going to jail for it. And that being said, there are some ways people are fighting back against this. Take what's happening in California. Look, depending the state you're in, you're pretty limited on what you can do about it. In California, though, there's now a business around kicking squatters off of people's properties. They've made a business out of evicting people through unconventional means, let's call it. Red State says it's called Squatter Squad. And according to the group's website, it says, Squatter Squad is a one-of-a-kind business in Southern California. We are not an eviction service because that would be illegal. They said, we have our own proprietary process for getting squatters out fast. Going through the eviction process can stretch into weeks and months, costing you time and money. While at the same time, these squatters are most likely damaging your property, causing even more anguish and expense. So basically what this group does is they use the squatter rights system against the squatters. Because, hypothetically speaking, if someone could just move into a house and claim they have the right to live there without paying rent, then why not just squat in the squatter house and then make their lives miserable enough that they want to move out all by themselves, right? Another thing he does is because he says a lot of them are felons, people who are squatting and so on, is he'll bring a firearm with him and he'll be like, hey, we can call the police right now. You're in a home with a firearm. You're going to jail if they come here. I'm not. And oftentimes they leave based on that. Now look, ironically, I think this could raise a whole other problem though. If people can just move into our homes and say, hey, we can live here without paying any rent, we can live here without doing anything, then what about legal homeowners having to pay things like property taxes? Could I, for example, legally squat in my own home? Or would the government be able to enforce the law in that case, right? If you own a home, can you just enact squatter rights in your own home and not pay rent? How does that work? How does it work if the bank comes after you, right? How does it work if you tell the bank, hey, I'm squatting here, you can't do anything about it? Can they then kick you out? Well, this is going to be the issue we're going to be running into very soon if this issue becomes much broader, because people will find other ways to enact it. And frankly, I doubt that they would be letting people violate it if it got to that level. Now, look, as this happens, of course, Democrats are pushing for more funding to facilitate mass illegal immigration. Not only that, every state Democrat just voted against stopping the use of taxpayer money to fly illegal aliens en masse into the United States, literally by the hundreds of thousands. I'll be talking more about this, though, after a quick word from our sponsor.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low-price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Hey, welcome back. Look, a Venezuelan illegal immigrant, as we just discussed, went viral for advocating for others just like him to invade and expropriate, his own words, right, the homes of Americans. These are of course, squatter rights that are being used to take over people's houses. So what's being done, you might ask, to stop illegal immigrants from coming here by the millions and then abusing American citizens, including when individuals like this even advocate for the abuse of American citizens? What's the government doing? Well, actually nothing. In fact, it's even beyond that. The Biden administration is even pushing to get more funding of our tax dollars to help facilitate more illegal mass immigration into the U.S. Let me show you this, folks. Representative Scott Perry had this. Let me play this for you.
That's happening at our country. And what is the left? The Democrats, what are they going to run on when they pass this bill? 22,000 border agents, 41,500 detention beds. 22,000 border agents, not on the border, not standing on the border with uniformed service members because they're back processing people illegally into the country. That's what they're doing. The beds will go unslept in. We're going to have more of them. These people aren't going to the beds. These people are coming to your community to sleep in a bed in your community, in our communities.
But hey, look, it might not even be they're coming here by the millions. It might even be the case they'll be sleeping in your own bed, in your own home, in your community. And then if you try kicking them out, maybe you will be the one arrested for a crime. And that being said, look, of course, you'd have to ask why that is. Why would certain officials allow American citizens to be treated this way by the people who are violating laws of our country at its foundations by illegally entering? Well, not sure, but in other news, an Obama judge just upheld a law in Washington, D.C. that allows illegal immigrants to vote in local elections. Gee, I wonder if this is why they're trying to let people in by the millions, right? Letting them vote in our elections. I wonder if these things are connected in some way, right? The Gateway Pundit says a federal judge on Friday upheld a Washington, D.C. law that allows non-citizens, including illegal aliens, to vote in municipal elections. It says that U.S. District Judge for the District of Columbia, Amy Berkman Jackson, an Obama appointee, seems like there's a trend here, right, tossed a lawsuit filed by a conservative group challenging the Local Rights of Resident Voting Rights Act passed by the D.C. Council in October 2022. The law not only allows non-citizens and illegals to vote, it also permits non-citizens to run for office in the United States. And what would you call that? I would call it the foreign takeover of the American government being funded by our tax dollars, being facilitated by the Biden administration, and being allowed to continue to take place through these Obama judges. Gee, makes you really wonder why they're, first of all, letting them in by the millions and then giving them voting rights, right? I kind of feel like maybe they're up to something. Now look, it's even worse. Remember recently when a group of over 100 illegal immigrants rushed Texas National Guard troops, tore down the barriers, and then assaulted many of our troops? Well, despite reports that some of the illegals were actually armed when they did that, they were allegedly allowed to enter the United States, and what they did basically was push past the Texas National Guard, then submitted themselves to Border Patrol agents standing behind them, who then put them through the whole mass migration system. Because the whole thing is a sham. The way it works, again, is they come across the border en masse. Sometimes they even schedule an appointment with CBP. They come across the border, surrender themselves, they get arrested, they get taken to processing facilities. DHS gives them a free airplane ticket to anywhere in the country. They're being given all these different benefits when they go through the system, and then they're literally released on the streets of the United States. And folks, guess what? The post-millennials said that the illegal immigrants who stormed National Guard's troops at the border on Thursday, again, may have been released into the U.S., according to New York Post reporter Jennifer Terre. And Terre appeared on Fox News, where she was asked by Dana Perino if any of these individuals made it into the interior of the country, and she confirmed that many of these illegal immigrants were processed by Border Patrol under Title VIII, a practice commonly known as catch and release. The method I just explained, where they take them to processing facilities, get them enrolled in all of our government programs, and then release them on the streets of the U.S. She said, quote, "This sends the message to people around the world that even if you can act like this, you can probably get into the country." And she said they continue to push these boundaries and to see what they can get away with. So you can beat up NYPD officers, you can assault troops again at the border, you can tear down barriers, you can squat in the homes of Americans without paying rent, you can rob Americans, you can drain their tax dollars, you can do all these things, and there's no repercussions. Now look, everything else aside, this one case in particular creates a really terrible precedent. Because if we begin as a country allowing illegal aliens through, even after they've assaulted U.S. troops, which again, National Guard in Texas, those would be American troops, this sends a message to others that this is an acceptable method to enter the United States. That you can assault our troops, you can tear down barriers, you can do anything, and you will still be let into this country, and you can do it without any consequences. Now, you might be wondering, well, certainly people are watching this. Certainly lawmakers will see this and do something about it. And, on the note of illegal entries, remember how recently we found out that the Biden administration had been chartering flights directly to bring hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens from their countries right into the United States? In other words, they don't even have to go through the border. They can schedule an appointment with Biden's CBP One app, which is what it's called, CBP One. Schedule an appointment, submit themselves, maybe go across the border and turn themselves in, or the Biden administration will use your tax dollars and charter an airplane to fly them in. Well, guess what? A bill was just brought to the Senate to stop this practice from happening. They tried stopping this, making it so that U.S. tax dollars cannot be used to facilitate mass illegal immigration by chartering flights. And guess what? Every single Democrat in the Senate voted against it. Every single Democrat in the Senate voted to continue using American tax dollars to directly fly illegal aliens into the United States. This is Republican Senator Bill Hagerty on the bill, which again would have stopped the Biden admin from using your tax dollars to finance illegal immigrant mass flights.
Do you support American taxpayer dollars being used to fly illegal immigrants from countries like Venezuela and Haiti into America to be settled in cities and towns near you? If so, then vote against me. Vote no to preserve this practice of using taxpayer dollars to charter planes that move and import thousands of illegal aliens into your states.
Now, look, I want to be clear on some of the language here. Any individual who talked about this before, who said the federal government is flying people in the dead of night, busing them all around the country, flying them all around the country, that this was happening, they were called conspiracy theorists, they were called racists, they were attacked, they were demeaned, they were tried, even systems trying to censor them, including myself, for example. If you mentioned that this was taking place, you were labeled and you were attacked. And now it's turned out that not only is it all true, but now we know that even members of Congress are all aware of it, and in fact, every single Democrat wants to keep it in place. They voted to use your tax dollars to ship people directly into this country from their country, including chartering flights. Now again, that program they're using to do this is part of CBP One, Customs Border Protection One, the app the Biden administration gives to aspiring illegal immigrants, whereby, again, they can make a scheduled appointment with Customs and Border Protection to illegally enter the United States. And real quick on that too, this Friday or very soon, we should have my special feature on the border crisis coming out, and I will show you exactly how a lot of this stuff works because we have it on video, folks. So stay tuned for more announcements on that. Now look, meanwhile, aside from what's currently taking place with mass illegal migration, there's also what could happen further down the line if it's able to continue like this. Because guess what? The Chinese Communist Party is playing the long game. When I was in Panama recently, again, I mentioned I'm doing a special feature documentary, should be out very soon. One thing that we saw, we actually went there, it's at the very end of the Pan American Highway, the highway that goes all the way from Alaska all the way down to the southern tip of Chile and breaks in only one part known as the Darien Gap on the southern border of Panama. In that one area where there's a break, that break prevents mass illegal immigration from most of South America because they have to walk through the jungle and it's very dangerous, so they want to bypass it. But now what's happening is there's a brand new bridge project that will one day connect Panama to Colombia. They're building it as we speak. And if that happens, it will mean the migrant trek will turn from a dangerous journey through the jungles into a simple bus ride right to the United States. And Epoch Times has now found the Chinese Communist Party is very much behind this. It notes here, construction workers have cleared towering trees to make way for a steel and concrete bridge mighty enough to withstand flooding from the river there. And it says an on-site worker for the construction company, CUSA, told the Epoch Times the construction project will cut 4 miles into the Darien jungle at a cost of $42 million and includes a second bridge crossing another river. It says that would leave some 55 miles to finish the Pan American Highway, also known as Highway 1, through the mountainous rainforest to connect it to Turbo, Colombia. If it's ever completed, it notes, the Pan American Highway will then stretch about 18,000 miles from Alaska to Argentina, opening up a land corridor the length of the Americas. And it notes further in, guess what? China's state-owned China Harbor Engineering Company, CHEC, along with 4 local companies, won the 2015 bid to build the bridge. And this is according to a nonprofit Columbia Reports website. Folks, this is part of the Belt and Road Initiative as well, which again is one of the main programs of the Chinese Communist Party for construction projects just like this in many countries, including there and elsewhere. Now, meanwhile, you might remember during the 2020 elections, Electoral College members in several states casted alternative votes. And this is, has its precedent. Democrats did it previously. Democrats were able to put in dueling electors, and there was no problem with it. They were accepted. It was not deemed illegal, and nobody went to prison for it. But now, alternate electors for Trump are facing criminal prosecution. You might have to wonder, why was the law, again, interpreted one way previously and a different way today? And mind you, had the alternate votes been accepted, Donald Trump would have won the 2020 elections by a landslide. But officials in several states blocked the electors from casting their votes. And on January 6, Vice President, again at the time, Mike Pence, read the Electoral College votes, but did not count the ones that were dueling electors. He chose not to do that. But now one of these dueling electors is speaking out, one of the ones being targeted, and he's revealing a system of political prosecution targeting him and others. This is from Anthony Kern. He's a state senator in Arizona who had been one of the alternate electors in 2020. We received a copy of his grand jury speech, and here's what he said in an emailed statement. He said, "Grand jury speech 2024. What's so wrong about standing up for the rule of law and our U.S. and Arizona constitutional principles? And when did that become a crime?" He says, "My name is Anthony Kern. I'm currently a state senator representing Legislative District 27, and I'm here in front of the Superior Court building this morning because I was an alternate elector in November 2020 for President Donald Trump." He said that he was asked to step up there, again, quote, "along with other ordinary citizens, and I chose to accept." Further in, he states, "I was honored and will always be honored to help preserve the constitutional election challenges filed both by the Democratic and Republican parties since the 1960 presidential elections." And he says, quote, "Indeed, up until the 2020 election, neither party had ever protested the election challenges of the other, and accusing them of engaging in criminal, illegal conduct and using lawfare tactics, right, legal warfare tactics, to bankrupt me and prevent me from running for office in 2024, because again, he's running for office and the charges against him are trying to interfere with that, he believes." Further, he states, "Isn't there something wrong when the rule of law gets applied discriminately in favor of only one political party, the Democratic Party?" I won't go over the whole thing, folks, but he is speaking up and he's standing out with this. And of course, he's calling out the legal prosecutions of others like him who again casted alternate votes during the 2020 election, something that was legally acceptable in the past, but has now become illegal under the Democrats. Now, that being said, in other news, Donald Trump got a partial victory in New York of the case that, again, in New York, Donald Trump was ordered to pay $464 million in cash for a bond after local authorities massively undervalued his properties, saying Mar-a-Lago is worth like a fraction of what it's actually worth, and then claimed that Trump overvalued them based on that, when in reality, it was very likely the opposite. An appeals court ruled that Trump can pay a reduced $175 million bond, which in my opinion is still absolutely ridiculous and should be illegal, based again on the Constitution and the idea of, again, just incredible fines like this. This will stop, though, this process going through right now, This will stop New York Attorney General from seizing his properties and draining money for his presidential campaign, which again, had he paid the full amount, would have drained pretty much all of his money for the campaign. Now, funny enough, Trump actually just went public with Truth Social and is now one of the top 500 richest men in the world. But aside from that, again, he's being legally attacked. And when Trump was asked by reporters what his collateral for the bond is as this moves forward, here was his response.
Thank you very much. What's your collateral for the bond? Cash.
Now look, in a follow-up statement, Trump also said that Judge Engeron, the one who oversaw the trial, and the trial, by the way, there was no jury, there was no direct precedent, it was a novel interpretation of law by this judge, and there was no victim. Normally, you need a victim to bring the case, but they brought a crime to the court with no victim. And Trump stood trial with no jury. And then, of course, the judge also refused to listen to decisions, Trump says, from appeals courts in making his ruling. Here's what Trump had to say about this. Quote, Judge Engeron has refused to obey the decision of the appellate division relative to the statute of limitations, suggesting that Judge Engeron had overstepped the statute of limitations and then ignored the appeals court when that was determined and just moved forward with it anyway. Trump said, this is a confrontation between a judge and those that rule above him. Trump suggesting that this judge has gone rogue in the prosecution of Trump. And he says, quote, Engeron has disrespected the appellate division in its very clear and precise ruling. He says further in, this is the 5th time in this case that he has been overturned, a record. His credibility and that of Letitia James, the, again, attorney, has been shattered. He says, we will abide by the decision of the appellate division and post either a bond, equivalent securities, or cash. And of course, he now says he's going to pay in cash. Now, at the same time, Trump is also saying he's going to fight the case right up to the Supreme Court. So it's, again, not clear whether he's going to fight it or pay it. Maybe he'll pay it in the meantime and just keep fighting it. But despite this, it's looking yet again like the case will backfire on Democrats, as has every other so far legal attempt they've made to stop him, or extra legal attempt, we should say. Many on the left are even saying that if Letitia James ended up seizing Trump's assets and maybe him paying this money, this would ironically, according to many establishment left-wing news outlets, this move would cause Trump to win the 2024 elections. Town Hall said this, Frank Luntz on a CNN panel, it says, suggested that Trump's chances of being elected in the 2024 presidential election will grow immensely over James's politically motivated case taking extreme measures. Again, the judge going after him and Letitia James. He cautioned the woke Democrat that her threat would backfire, directing his "you are going to elect Donald Trump" comment at her, telling Letitia James if she keeps going after Trump, she is going to elect Donald Trump by doing so. And here's the exact quote. He said, he's going to go up in the polls just like he went up every single time they indicted him. If the New York Attorney General starts to take his homes away, starts to seize his assets, it's all going to be on camera. Pundits are going to sit there and scream about this, and you're going to create the greatest victimhood of 2024, the criminal prosecution of Donald Trump by what appears to be a criminal regime acting under the color of authority. Now, folks, we'll be jumping into questions very soon, but first, this illegal immigration issue is not new. I exposed this a few years ago, in fact, in a special report I did called Border Deception. You can watch this and all my other documentaries, and that one notably, I exposed the role of the United Nations in this. And you can also see my special reports as well. That's only on Epoch TV, EpochTV.com. I'll be coming out with a new documentary on the border really soon, as I've been mentioning. So for those of you on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Rumble, please consider supporting us on EpochTV.com. Let me show you a quick trailer of the documentary I did before called Border Deception. Again, we'll go into questions after that, so don't go anywhere. What use is a wall if the migrant crisis is being facilitated by the United Nations working with NGOs.
Many of the people that can't get visas to come, like, start off in Mexico, they start in South America.
Is this a coordinated effort? And if so, what's the motive?
Families coming across claiming asylum because they had children, but there was the same children every week. They started testing DNA to make sure that the children were in fact children of the parents. 30% weren't.
What's really happening at the U.S.-Mexico border?
These are all human smuggling cases from the past couple of weeks.
What caused the U.S. policy shift from mass immigration? All right, welcome back. Folks, let's jump into some questions. First up from Shulofu. You're saying, people work hard to pay for their homes, pay taxes, just to give it all away to lawbreakers. Yeah, I mean, there's some really sad stories. I've seen reports, for example, of people who are trying to rent out a property or sell a property, because it's not even just renters. It could be that, you're like, you know what, I want to move, I need to sell my house, I'm in dire straits. You put a for sale sign out in front of your house, you go and live with your grandma while they're cleaning it up. And then while you're, out of your house for a little bit, some squatters see the for sale sign, move into your home, take down the sign, and then you're homeless. There have been actual documented cases of this where people are homeless while squatters live in the home they were trying to sell. In fact, there was one story, I believe it was even in California. There was a guy who had to live in his car in front of his own home because squatters had taken over the property. And again, how do they live tax-free? How do they live without the banks coming after them? How is it that, again, we have to pay property taxes? We have to pay all these other fines and everything like that, or taxes, all the time. And if we don't, the banks will seize our properties from us, but people can go and squat in a property and the banks don't go after them. How does that work, right? How is it that that can possibly take place? And again, as you mentioned too, people are working hard, paying their taxes, and again, they're being abused by people who are just breaking the law, whether it's people whose fundamental entry into the United States was a violation and a disrespect for American law, again, the illegal aliens, or whether it's just criminals here who believe they have a free pass. How is it that the legal system is protecting criminals over law-abiding citizens? We discussed Frederick Bastiat in his book, The Law, previously, that the danger of law further down the road as a society develops is when law gets co-opted by the criminals it was meant to, again, hold to account in the very first place. When law becomes a tool of tyranny, or pillage as he put it, or plunder, rather than something to protect us from plunder. In other words, law is protecting criminals and it is punishing good people. We have an inverted legal system right now, unfortunately, because of the way these things are being done. And frankly, I don't know if it's going to last that long because people are going to get fed up real quick. TCICT19, you're saying, it took my sister a year and a half to evict a tenant who had a 2-month lease. After 4 years where he rented out rooms, imported a girlfriend and moved his mother in, he still only paid $200 a month in exchange for minor repairs, which were never completed. He quit paying after 2 years. Her fees for the eviction was over $2,000. I've heard of stories like this. There was even during COVID-19, during the lockdowns, when the federal government told people they didn't have to pay rent. And again, we oftentimes think of landlords as being just big, rich corporations, but sometimes it's not like that. Sometimes, you might not make a whole lot of money off a property. You might make a couple $100 a month, depending on, how you do it, frankly. But given that circumstance, if the landlord, of course, can't, again, make money from it, what's going to happen? They're going to go out of business. And what this is going to do also is just put out of business the small landlords while helping the big business ones stay in business and probably buy up more properties when they go back on the market. This is, in other words, creating a monopoly on residential properties, and frankly, I wonder if there are people plotting this. I wonder if that's the real agenda behind it. to force, again, private homeowners to sell their properties so that big investment firms might be able to buy them up and create a monopoly. And remember, that is happening. Not saying they're directly involved with what I just described, but BlackRock Investment, for example, is buying up residential properties all throughout the United States. They're buying up single-family homes. And again, that's going to be significant because they're trying to phase out single-family homes in a lot of areas. They want people to live in apartments. And so a single-family home is going to be a very valuable asset if they can continue pushing that agenda. And yeah, it's sad too when people, again, just don't get anything out of it, and people want to live rent-free like that, right? And frankly, I'd say it's communist too. Remember, in China, during the Cultural Revolution under the Chinese Communist Party, one of the main targets they had in the original movement was to go after landlords. The landlord class, it was always one of the key narratives of Maoism. They want to get rid of the landlords. And again, what happens when you do that? Well, look at communist China, because that was the method they used to establish power. One of the very first steps they took. Steve Walsh is saying America will completely fall to communism. Yeah, case in point. Which has been their plan for 100 years, as they have infiltrated everything needed, like politicians. It really is Trump or bust. Guns, gone. Single-family homes, gone. Free speech, gone. We didn't love freedom enough. I think actually if it is able to continue like this, it's probably not far off, to be honest. At the same time, I've given hope by the idea that, again, people are waking up and people are seeing through it now. I personally believe the pushback is strong enough where it's going to be very hard to have a communist revolution in this country. But at the same time, I believe that, frankly, we have incredibly corrupt people in power, and not all of them, but a good handful of them. Incredibly corrupt people in power who are using the color of law to enact, I think, very devious agendas. And they're using, of course, their authority to persecute, in many instances, law-abiding good people while empowering criminals to abuse law-abiding good people. And frankly, I do wonder how long that can continue for, frankly, before people stand up. Culture Diablo, you're saying, hi Josh, as a writer, I just read the March 1939 full translation of Hitler's Mein Kampf. Surprise! Hitler was rabidly obsessed with race. Got me thinking, who today has a like obsession with race? Perhaps the woke cultural neo-Marxists. As I've discussed before, the modern left is actually closer to fascism, Nazism, than it is to actual communism. In fact, the public-private partnerships, where they're using, again, corporations and so on as the arms to carry out their, again, policies, for example, censorship and otherwise. Public-private partnerships where they're, again, going through companies to control and abuse people, the use of national unions, which is a fascist tactic under Mussolini, and yes, race politics. All of these are very close to, again, fascism, Nazism in this case. Actually, I had a debate with a friend years ago where I was telling him that Hitler was a socialist and he didn't believe me. So I read Mein Kampf too to prove it to him. And yeah, that was my impression as well. Hitler was a rabid socialist. He was a rabid socialist. And frankly, I think it's pretty well established now. You don't have to read it to know that. You can read other books that are fantastic that explain the actual political policies of the Nazi regime and understand that if you look at their policies and you read like Bernie Sanders' policies, it's almost the same. Like, I'm not exaggerating. If you were to look at the original policies of the Nazi Party and compare it to the policies of the Democrat Party right now, they're almost the same. Free health care, all these things, right? In fact, I would say that it's important to know this because the Nazi has become a label detached from the idea of being an actual political system. And when you understand that it was an actual political system and you compare it to what's happening these days, you will start to see the parallels of it. For those of you wanting to learn more about that and exactly how it was a socialist regime, in fact, again, Mussolini was one of the most popular socialists in all of Europe, by the way. I would recommend reading a book by Ludwig von Mises called Planned Chaos. Planned Chaos, again, I read a lot, it is the best book that explains how the Nazis were socialists and how it did not work as a system. The problems with their, again, from a purely economical standpoint and a purely policy standpoint, why it was a broken system based entirely on socialism. It's called Planned Chaos. I highly recommend it. And I would also recommend there's Richard Pipes, Russia and the Bolshevik Revolution. I've mentioned it before. Another very good book that explains how the Nazis were just socialists. Again, it's the National Socialist Party, right? They didn't try to hide it per se. Real quick, though, is a quick note of how the narrative on Nazism being detached from being a communist/socialist system took place. This took place mainly through, again, the cultural Marxists in the United States. The Frankfurt School, which again was run out of at one of the New York colleges, the Frankfurt School was a group of, again, it was a Marxist study institute. They reinterpreted communism and reinterpreted Nazism, Hitler's regime, and instead of calling it a communist or socialist regime, went through a whole roundabout method to detach it from the communist movements of the day. And it's because of their roundabout interpretations that modern socialists somehow don't realize that, hey, they're practicing the same thing Hitler did, and they don't actually view the Nazi system as being a system with actual political policies and so on. They've been able to completely ignore the parallels of their beliefs with Adolf Hitler, funny enough, because of this roundabout way of thinking through, again, the Frankfurt School. Alfred's mom, you're saying, Josh, don't we have voting rules in our Constitution? Even legal residents were not allowed to vote until they naturalize. The judges are breaking laws too. Well, unfortunately, this is what we're having in this country, is we have a politicized legal system, just being blunt, right? I should note, this was actually one of the key things that was said to be the first step in the downfall of a republic. If you were to read The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, which was written around the same time as the United States was founded, by the way, right, late 1700s, I highly recommend it, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. You will see written in there that the way that a republic falls, and we are a republic, not a democracy, by the way, the first step in a republic falling is the politicization of the legal system. Because as soon as a legal system begins serving a political interest rather than a direct legal interest, that means that the regime or an emperor or a one-party state has overtaken the divisions of power. And it means that the legal system now represents a tyranny. It represents a dictator, or it represents a political faction that has become the single faction that controls the country. In other words, a republic dies when there's a breakdown in the divisions of power. Because a republic is defined, again, as government of the people, by the people, and for the people, not of a political interest around one individual or a party of individuals. This is as opposed to, for example, living under a king, which again would be a dictatorship, of course. It would also be different from a communist system, which again would also be a one-party dictatorship. Either the party controls things or the individual controls things. A republic is, again, where the individuals, the people, elect representatives to represent them in the democratic process. You would call it, again, a representative democracy rather than direct democracy. But of course, it's also defined by divisions of power to ensure that one individual or one party does not dominate the system, thereby altering it and turning it into a tyranny. And so, again, as soon as the political system becomes politicized, that is the end of a republic. That's when the republic ends. And I believe that America is coming very, very, very close to that. If we defend the American Republic from anything, the weaponization and politicization of our legal system is the last bastion of, again, protecting the country from tyranny. Let's see. Good Panda, you're saying the states need to change their laws. Why do we even need this law? I believe you're talking about the squatters' rights. You have had some states change it. Funny enough, people, I have a friend in Florida, he's like, yeah, I'd like to see them try that here. They only recently changed the law in Florida on squatter rights. Until very recently, this law, the squatter rights laws, even applied to Florida. But yeah, again, using local state law, they did change it just recently. So it does go state by state. States actually can overturn that law or create their own laws to block that from happening. Again, Florida just did it. So if you're in Florida, I don't know if there's other loopholes that can be taken advantage of, but for the most part, the squatter rights law does not apply there. And again, only a very recent change, by the way. Seymour Butts, you're saying, today we live in a world where non-citizens are treated better than citizens. That's accurate. Where parents are afraid to discipline their own kids, where men can go into women's restrooms, we accept one insane thing after another. Very similar to the Jews doing what the Germans told them to do, knowing they were going to be killed. How do they do this? They divide us into little groups and sow hate between us. They confuse and drug us. They poison our blood and our minds, or poison our food and our minds. They control the media. I'd actually agree on every point. It is the slow boiling of the frog, right? They do it step by step. But personally, I think that they pushed it a little too fast, a little too far too fast, or maybe way too far too fast. I feel like they've hit the breaking point. You might notice, for example, the left is trying to get off the train on, for example, gender mutilization of children. They're getting off the train on a lot of the woke policies because it's blowing up in their faces. People were boycotting companies. Really, Bud Light was a turning point for this nation when they had Dylan Mulvaney, the trans guy drinking beer and saying, hey, drink beer with me, I guess. People don't want it. And the pushback against him and Bud Light and Target, those represented a shift culturally in this country. People openly rejected it and said, we're not going to support this stuff if you keep doing it. That was also the breaking point as well, where, again, representatives and local states began going after even the ESG policies, and including companies like BlackRock and so on, saying that they're essentially strong-arming companies into pushing policies that are bad for investment. Again, suggesting that they may be violating several laws, possibly, and forcing companies to adopt policies that do not result in profits. And so things have begun to change. That being said, though, always be careful of the communist dialectic. The communist dialectic this is how it works. They'll push and they'll push and they'll push until you push back. And as soon as you push back, they'll back off, right? They'll back off. And then you put your guard down, right? And then they keep pushing and pushing and pushing again. They wait for you to put your guard down, and then they keep advancing their policies. That's the nature of progressivism, right? That's the progress of communism, moving through the system and trying to enact what they want to achieve. That's what progressivism means, right? It's the advancement of the socialist or communist system. Step by step, the boiling of the frog. And I would say, actually, that people should wake up to this. It is very much true that the American citizens are being just absolutely abused by tyrannical law. And again, criminals are getting the opposite treatment. There's an inversion of good and evil right now, right? There's an inversion of good and evil. Good is being punished and evil is being rewarded in the world today. And I do believe this will change eventually, but currently that is seemingly the state. Bren B., you're saying, meanwhile, our militaries in every other country for no good reason. Yeah, I know. There are some other ways of thinking about that. For example, it was explained to me, because I was criticizing this as well, it was explained to me by some individuals that, of course, that actually helps finance our military, as funny as it is. Because let's say America has a massive military, which we do. If they go, for example, to other countries rather than staying in the U.S., the other countries oftentimes will cover some of the living expenses for our troops to be there. And so that means we have to pay less to have our troops. America is able to have the large military it does partly by having bases in other countries. At the same time, of course, other countries should play a bit, in my opinion, should play a bit more of a role themselves as well. We shouldn't be the ones bearing the brunt of being like the global military of the free world. Other countries need to play their role too. I do think that mainly because of Trump, a lot of countries did start building up their militaries again. We are seeing a return of that. But of course, it may be a little bit too little too late, given the way that the hostile nations to the U.S., Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and others, seem to be taking advantage of the opening left in the power vacuum of the world as the United States has become pretty weak on the world stage, frankly. But again, we'll see, right? Let's see here. And the other thinking, too, is when the way that money works is funny, right? When America, this has been explained to me by Jewish friends, who are very pro-Israel, because I was like, man, were you really going to give them all this money? And the way they explained it to me was this. When we give money to other countries for defense spending, what do? They take a lot of that money and they buy goods from American defense companies, meaning the money just goes full circle right back to the coffers of U.S. defense companies. And oftentimes that money will then circulate down through the economy. It's one of the thinkings they have with this stuff. I don't think we should just be handing out pallets of cash the way that Biden's been doing it, frankly. But that's part of the thinking they have, is that the money comes right back into the American system anyway. I would say that we should close some other loopholes within that, though. For example, allowing remittances from mass illegal immigration. For example, offshoring a lot of our factories, which again would destroy that whole narrative in the first place, because you can say the money goes back to American companies, but if we offshore it, it does not go to American companies. And so again, we end up losing a lot on that and frankly gain very little in most circumstances. And so there are some areas of that I believe should be closed in order to more strongly benefit the American people when we try to help people. I think Americans, not only do we actively try to help other countries, but not only do we get nothing in return in most instances, but we even get no gratitude in return. I do believe, I'd actually agree with Trump on this as well, that he's been saying that basically we should benefit from these things. We should get something in return. It should not be a one-way street, especially when these other countries are so incredibly ungrateful to the United States when we do give them help, in often case, right? And not only that, but then even further take advantage of us in most cases. Let's see here. Michael Retana, you're saying progressives keep moving left and conservatives just slow the left movement down instead of moving back to the right. I'd actually say that maybe it's changing now, but I'd say until very recently, we have not had a true conservative party. The modern conservatives are more like classical liberals, technically. You could argue that America, from the very get-go, was a liberal democratic country, classical liberalism being the era, for example, of Frederick Bastiat and so on, right? Ludwig von Mises would be a classical liberal. The current systems of the world are based very much in classical liberalism, what they would call the liberal democratic world order, right? The liberal democracies. The issue is, though, we've come to interpret liberalism, meaning leniency, meaning, for example, you live your life, I'll live mine, and you can make your own choices. We've come to confuse liberalism with communism. A lot of the left these days is actually just communist. They are not liberals. And I think we falsely use the liberal label because of that. Conservatism is the holding on to traditions. It means you want to conserve what is there. But even that is interpreted differently depending on which country you're in. If you're a conservative, let's say early on in parts of Europe, it meant you wanted to have monarchy, right? You were a monarchist and you didn't want the liberalization that would lead to democracy. In America, for example, during the Revolution, again, it was liberalism that was the policy of the Founding Fathers, trying to establish a republic at the time, right? which they did. And conservatives would have been the people in favor, for example, of of the Mad King of England, right? And you could argue that the Canadians were the conservatives who actually stayed loyal to, again, the United Kingdom, while the United States, again, became its own country under a liberal democratic order. Again, a republic being representative democracy, right? So it's the language is a bit messed up. At the same time, too, I think we debate on a lot of false dichotomies. Right and left is being interpreted these days as fascist or communist, and we have to choose somewhere between the two, when in reality, fascism and Nazism are socialist. In other words, this is the dichotomy of the left, fascism and communism. And those both represent very far left, evil regimes, frankly. We, in reality, should be debating on a completely different plane. If you go back to the original interpretations of good and evil, it was actually not even a political interpretation. It was about left and right, being left-hand path or right-hand path, or left wing and right wing as it was first introduced during the time of the French Revolution. It's a spectrum of good and evil, not of political dichotomy. And communism is fundamentally a representation of just pure evil, frankly. And I'd point to things like dialectical materialism. I'd point to their roots mainly in Gnostic practices and actual Satanism. I'm not joking. Again, I've done quite a bit of reporting on that. It's absolutely evil. It represents this world. It represents the tossing out of the God-made world, rejection of tradition handed down by heaven, right, and by God. The traditions that have maintained the way of life, the belief that if humanity rejects tradition, religion, morality, and everything that constituted the world as it was, then this is the communist idea, right? Then man can build a world in the image of man. But first, of course, they believe you need to destroy everything that was a product of the belief in God, which means everything of the old world. Every culture, every tradition, every belief, every religion, every moral standard, all of that needs to be torn down in their belief. And if you look at what the left is doing these days, even though a lot of them don't understand it like this, it's what they're doing. They're going after the family. They're going after, again, the basic interpretation of male and female, the basic lens through which we interpret good and evil. They're remaking morality through an anti-moral system. Again, I don't think they understand the origins of any of this. If you go back to the French Revolution, they still did. Again, the French Revolution being a product, again, of the cercle social, which was, again, these frankly evil cults, just being blunt, which led, of course, to the formation of communism through Francois Noël Gracchus Babeuf. Those systems at the time understood this. They referred to themselves as naturists. And when I say evil cults, I'm not exaggerating. They established what they called the cult of reason. And then, of course, the head of the Committee of Public Safety established a separate one called the cult of the Supreme Being, crowning himself in the image of God, by the way. And under the cult of reason, which was the first state-run atheist religion in France, by the way, they enacted what they called the de-Christianization movement, where they were killing, torturing, everything you can imagine. They were killing off all the Christians. And, even, for example, just doing things that were blasphemous, having prostitutes in the temples and churches, bringing farm animals in, committing such incredibly lewd acts that even the head of their party thought it was too far, which is why he formed the cult of the Supreme Being. They were cults. They were evil cults in the truest sense of the word. And that's the origin of communism. The very idea of naturism is this. It is that they believe, at the time this was their religion, right? They believed that anything that is of human nature is good. And so any sexual urge, any urge to kill or whatever else, that is your nature. They believe that, hey, creation is perfect, right? And so the individual and human will, unbridled, unrestrained by morality, is what is good. And anything that stops that is evil. So they interpreted religion and morals as being evil, because that, in their eyes, was restricting human nature. In other words, people without restraint, who were indulgent, who would do whatever they felt like in the moment, that was the origin of these things. And if you look at the way law is currently interpreted, it's on this dichotomy. It's from that root. I don't personally believe the people currently practicing these things understand this, because it's become so deeply rooted in the culture of the communist left. It has become so deeply embedded in their fundamental ideologies that they no longer understand what they're even doing. It's an inversion of good and evil, as I was saying. Evil, right, in their eyes is good. It's the unbridled human nature. You can identify as whatever you want. You can squat in people's homes. You can illegally enter the United States. What is evil instead is if you criticize it, if you as a moral system say, I disagree with this, if you engage in any act that criticizes their indulgent sexual perversions or whatever else, they say you are evil, not because you're enacting a form of what would be traditionally interpreted as evil, but instead that you are criticizing the unbridled naturist manifestation that they're engaging in. Again, that is the actual debate we're in right now. It is a battle of good and evil, not of surface political systems and not of anything else. If you understand the origin of the true left, the left-hand path, right? When God says that he will gather the world before him and place them on his right and left, and on the left will be the goats, and he'll toss them into hell. That's left-hand path, right? Again, people don't understand this is what we're actually debating on. That is the true nature of the political systems we face today. And the true nature of communism, frankly. It is a left-hand path religion that has taken on the form of a political system. That said, if you want to watch something on this, by the way, I did a special series called The Dark Origins of Communism. You can watch that on Epoch TV. Again, EpochTV.com. You can also go to EpochTV.com, EpochTV.com/origins, and you can watch that series. Where again, I explain this history. I explain Nazism as being, again, a socialist system. I explain the French Revolution. I go deeply into a lot of these individuals and their beliefs and how the whole thing came about. I think it's very important. All right, folks, that said, sorry to go very long on that last question, but I think it's necessary to talk about these things. Thank you all so much for being here. Please don't forget to share this video. Help us get the word out about Crossroads. And again, tune in tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time for more Crossroads and more news. Thank you so much for being here, folks. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you. In every country communism gains power, authoritarianism and death followed in its wake. Communism promises a world without suffering, and yet, in its execution, does the exact opposite. Following Lenin's death, Stalin's 29-year reign killed an estimated 60 to 66 million people. More famines and purges would occur. The very peasants that communism was supposed to benefit instead starved to death under its rule. The party dictates what is right and wrong. Mao ended up killing between 50 million and 70 million people. As an investigative journalist, I want to understand why.